Hello and welcome to the AgCulture Podcast, where we share insights about the future of agriculture. Each week we dive into the stories, technologies, and ideas shaping a profitable and sustainable future for farms and rural communities alike. I'm Paul Windemuller, host of the AgCulture Podcast, and today I had the pleasure of interviewing Jehan Ettema from Denmark. Jehan is the co-founder of a company out of Denmark called SimHerd. And we're going to have a great discussion today on today's episode about the concept of a farm digital twin. Now, if you haven't heard of this concept before, this is a concept that has really blown up as the AI revolution has taken on steam because of the amount of data that can be processed now and scenarios that can be looked at of farm performance, animal health, disease, pressure, things of that nature. So we're going to go in depth on this topic today with an expert in the field. And I really enjoyed this conversation. So sit back and enjoy this episode with Jehan Ettema. All right, Jehan Ettema, welcome to the AgCulture Podcast today. It's so good to have you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I can join you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation. I believe we first connected, it was probably 3-4 months ago now. I originally put out a LinkedIn article, I believe it was, is how we connected, about the concept of digital twins of farms. And we had some conversation back and forth on LinkedIn and decided to do an episode on this concept. I think it's a really interesting concept. Not hugely popular in a lot of the dairy world and a lot of the farming world in general. But why don't we start out, as we cover this topic, give us your overview of what is a digital twin of a farm.
All right. First of all, I think I ran into the word just more and more frequently lately. I don't know, the last half year. It keeps popping up. And maybe different people have different definitions, but I think a digital twin is basically a model or some kind of computer simulation tool that continuously imports data from the farm, like historical data, and thereby is able to continuously mimic the same farm with a model. So a farm has, 1 million parameters. A digital twin doesn't have that many parameters, but at least it tries to mimic, how does this farm operate? What's the production, reproduction, health status of this farm, and imitate that, and thereby basically mimic what happens on the farm, which then allows you to, ask this what-if question, and without setting sail to a whole bunch of scenarios or interventions, your digital twin can run through 1 or 2 or 10 scenarios.
And you're the CEO of a company out of Denmark, where you're coming from today, and it's called SimHerd, correct?
Yes, it's correct. I'm not CEO. I am the founding partner together with my colleague called Søren. Søren is actually the CEO, and Søren, he is also the main scientist behind SimHerd. So SimHerd is under development at the university. He's the professor supervising students, writing grants, writing papers. So everything he does at the University of Aarhus is basically funneled into the SimHerd company that then tries to commercialize this software and tries to make this user-friendly and accessible for farmers, vets, advisors. So that's SimHerd is the way out, is the bridge we built from science to practice.
And that's been around for quite some time. It's not a new concept. It's been around since 1992, I believe.
Since 1992. It's horrific to go that far back.
They had computers back then, huh?
There were computers. They were very slow. I remember they had this anecdote where they had to start the simulation on Friday and it was done on Monday.
Run it over the weekend.
Exactly. But yeah, like the framework of we're simulating individuals, we're simulating calves become heifers become cows, and cows are culled. Some cows are cults, others are not. So there's this whole interaction. That concept has been around since 1992, and the whole SimHerd journey basically meant that we have expanded that framework of simulating animals. So every scientist through the year, every grad student, I was one of them, has added their piece of the puzzle to the SimHerd model. So it kept growing. I think there's a lot of modeling nerds all over the world. They are definitely equally bright as us. I think the difference is that we have been working with the same framework, and it has been growing ever since. But the SimHerd company is only 16 years old. So we started to commercialize this software since 2010.
Okay. And originally, if I remember right, it was supporting more advisors, vets, and nutritionists. And now you've kind of pivoted a little bit and focused more on the farm operators themselves. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we have two legs to stand on. Like originally, SimHerd really was born out of veterinary epidemiology. Let's simulate the economic impact of diseases, animal health economics. Later, as we also got shareholders in the field of genetics, Viking Denmark is a co-op of cattle breeders. We also got a leg to stand on, which is called genetic breeding optimization. How does the farmer make the best breeding decision? Sexed semen, beef semen, genomics. And all that was used in this big, heavy-duty SimHerd model, which was operated by vets, by advisors. But we wanted to make something more like light, edible for farmers as well, for day-to-day decisions. So you can say we make SimHerd light versions. We make like small applications that cannot answer a million questions, but only 2 or 3 questions of particular interest for a farm or for an advisor.
And I want to take a quick side trip here a second. When I was visiting Denmark, I really found it fascinating, the vast information in the national database for dairy farms that Denmark has. Can you explain a little bit of that, and then any coordination or work that you do along with that database?
So the database is also farmer-owned. The farmers, they collaborate around genetics, like I mentioned, but this whole Danish advisory service and a central cattle database has been around forever as well. And that's where this database keeps growing. I think the uniqueness is that all the milk yield recording, disease recordings, reproduction, everything that happens on a farm is registered on one place, in one database. Well managed, farmer owned, and that data is basically what happened to the farm previously. We need historical data to make future predictions. We do the latter, we make future predictions, but if we don't have good historical data, the future predictions are useless. And this historical data is I think, well organized, good quality, in a central place in the middle of Denmark.
And how does it ensure the quality of data? I know that's one thing when I was traveling around the world. There's a big difference in quality of data. How did that actually be ensured in a program like that?
Denmark is a small country, so I think it's rather easy to educate everyone about how data is recorded, to get agreement on what dashboards and developments you want to create together. So I think it's a rather easy, small, overseeable country to get agreement on data quality, to get some standards. Like if we want to do breeding value estimation, we have to have some good definitions on health traits and reproductive traits. And I think that was achieved rather easy in one country compared to, I don't know, coast to coast, a country like America or other bigger countries. I think there was alignment pretty fast. And that also goes across Sweden and Finland. They're quite on the same line in terms of those data definitions.
And now, SimHerd, if I remember right from our discussions earlier, you work across several different countries now, North America, as well as throughout Europe. How does that translate now in the models that you're building? I mean, you started out, as you just mentioned, in Denmark with everything very uniform.
Yeah, it's not that easy to, export software like that. Of course, you don't have to move any units, but to go to Canada is one of the biggest, most recent additions, you can say, where there's a milk quota, where there's a completely different payment for milk, fat and protein in combination with the quota, makes it quite difficult to understand. So they have a different payment system, but then some of the repro data is expressed different. Some of the metrics, just some people talk calving interval, others talk preg rate. Those are the easy parts. But I think the common denominator, which makes SimHerd very strong in countries like that, is that SimHerd is basically full of Journal of Dairy Science epidemiology, like saying what's the effect of mastitis on a cow. What if a cow doesn't get pregnant? Well, she ends up being culled. What if a calf grows fast? She becomes a high-yielding first parity cow. I think these biological, physiological knowledge, I think that's valid for high-productive dairy cows all over the world. What makes it special is, milk quota in Canada. In the US, there's a lot of synchronization programs. There's heat stress that we have less in Scandinavia. In Australia, there's seasonal calving, right? But all that is a matter of tweaking parameters. But the framework, the inner workings of SimHerd, how diseases affect a cow, basically, I think that can be used elsewhere. But we need partners, local partners. In Canada, that was, for example, Lactanet or University of Guelph, that help us explain, this is our country, this is how we do things, you better tweak your model, right? Or else the farmers are not going to buy the output of your model.
What are some of the other learnings that you had as you ventured into new markets?
The role of veterinarians. I think in Scandinavia, the vets, to a high degree, are advisors. They are to a less degree pharmacists. So they're actually, by law, they have to, visit farms and do a lot of preventive work and do a lot of data-based quality control, you can say. So for Scandinavian vets, it was pretty obvious to use a tool like SimHerd and back their health advice up with economics. That's why SimHerd was born. A bunch of Danish vets said, we need a model that quantifies what we say in euros. So that went well. But then going to other countries, I think the role of the vet can be completely different, where vets are pharmacists and not the go-to person for advice. Maybe that's more of a nutritionist or a general health advisor. So I think the stakeholders and the one operating a digital twin can be very different from country to country, and you should know that before you go anywhere.
And what are some of the biggest holes that you see right now in the concept of digital twins for farms, whether that be a dairy farm or any other type of farm? Do you think it's more so on the financial aspects and understanding that, or are there other operational holes?
Like holes, like what some digital twins can't capture, you mean?
Where they don't perform as well as what you'd want to see them to.
Okay.
Because you talked a lot, it sounded like it started in genetics, so I'm guessing on the genetic side it's very powerful, and same on the health side now. But where are some of those other areas of the farm that really need support and more data to increase the power of that?
I think a dairy herd is a complex thing.
Yeah.
And if you would do rather simplified calculations, whether that's a spreadsheet or like a more simple twin, you can risk double counting. 2 + 2 is 5. Or you can risk that factoring a certain improvement. A classical one is like if you would use heat detection technology, you get more cows pregnant, they get pregnant faster. That's all wins, right? That's great. But it also means that on an annual basis, you will have more calvings, which is also great. But then your disease risk on an annual basis is also higher. So if you had a lot of milk fever before, then you start to improve your reproductive performance. You get more older cows and they get pregnant again. You're going to get more milk fever, which doesn't make it a bad idea to have sensor technology. But there's a downside. The same with getting more animals pregnant. You're going to get more young stock. There's a lot more work. You're going to have more cows calving, more drying off, just a lot more work. So a farmer has to, factor that in. Because he's not in it for buying the next fancy sensor. He has to have a good decision support. So I think if you do things too easy, you forget some downsides of improvements, or you run into some double counting.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If you talk about genetics, I think 12, pretty fast after SimHerd was born as a company, we really got into this whole sexed semen, beef semen discussion. We're a little bit ahead in terms of politics demanding less young stock, less methane producing units. Already that was a pretty difficult question to simulate. Like if we reduce our number of young stock, we have cows that get, on average, a heavier calf from a beef breed. We're gonna maybe run out of heifers because we overuse beef semen. We can compensate that, with more sexed semen and then try to balance it out and hope for the best. There, I think simulation models, can be justified, that you factor in all these things, and you factor also in some downsides. A little bit lower conception rate of sexed semen, a little bit more heavy calving due to beef semen. I think the farmer also likes these, the facts that we take care of those maybe details, but it can fill a lot in the mind of a farmer. Like, I'm going to use these beef pools on my cows. How is that going to affect their calving ease? And then we say, well, we factored that in with this or that parameter. And then you feel you get a lot of credibility if you explain it like that. I think the farmer wants to be acknowledged in concerns. You have to put them in your twin.
Yeah, I guess that's a really good point. How do you bring about that transparency to the farms to make sure that they have the confidence to go along with what the digital twin is actually giving as an output?
If I could answer that real quick, we'd be doing even better now. Because you can kill anyone with a lot of insights, a lot of parameters, a lot of assumptions. We took care of this and that and the other. So there's a balance between transparency and simply boring people. So I think what you need, I think, is a good narrative. I mean, SimHerd spun out of a university. University still owns the code. University co-owns the company, a small chunk. We're not selling anything. We're not having any interest in fallout of a certain calculation. I think we documented the expansions of the SimHerd model in 40 peer-reviewed papers. So that part is good. And then the ability to explain your results, your message. I think we can have all the spreadsheets and dashboards in the world, but the person who delivers the message also, should have a good story and explain and read the receiver of that message, see what he or she can understand. So I think, a good chunk of documentation, what we have, and then communication. Like, don't overfeed with details, but also don't go with the one-liners, or, my SimHerd model tells you can earn 100,000. I mean, that's just not good enough. You have to break it down. Like, where does this 100,000 come from? Okay, you're going to sell more milk and you're going to cull fewer cows. Why are you culling fewer cows? Well, we factored in that better conception, etc. So I think it's a good story you have to tell as well.
Now, stepping back a little bit, looking at the bigger picture with AI and modeling in general, that's getting more and more attention every day. And the models are getting much more powerful. What are the guardrails you think farmers need to put in place in order to stay control of the data themselves and what's happening with the data?
Guardrails, I think data ownership, I don't know how much they can decide themselves, but I think like the cooperative approach where farmers are together whether it's breeding cows or having a database together, basically, I think they should make sure that they own their own data as much as possible. And then if you're just one person, it's tough. But if you collaborate with colleagues, with other farmers, I think you have the power to be in control on your own data.
Exactly what I wrote about in my Nuffield paper. So,
all right, very good.
Saw that as well. So looking at 5-10 years down the road, 10 years probably a little too far with how much things are progressing, but what do you see that most excites you about the concept of the digital twin simulation for farms?
I think two things. First of all, like I said, SimHerd is full of Journal of Dairy Science references. If we simulate the economic impact of, just last week I talked to a farmer, I have to go out to him next week. He has a big problem with Klebsiella, E. coli mastitis, has a lot of investments in his mind. What could I do to improve bedding or whatever? I have to go there and make an economic assessment of that with SimHerd. In that assessment, I would fall back to a Journal of Dairy Science paper saying what E. coli does to a cow when she gets E. coli mastitis. So I have a very credible story to the farmer. He will, believe me when I present my SimHerd paper. That's great, a good Journal of Dairy Science reference, but I think the next step is that we need to use the data from the farm even better. There's a lot of data collected on every day. I think we should have a herd-specific estimate of what is coli mastitis doing to the cows in this herd, because it might be something different than Journal of Dairy Science. So the simulation models like SimHerd should be fed even more with herd-specific data. Not just what's the milk yield level, what's the conception rate, culling rate, but okay, how is mastitis affecting animals in this herd, and how can certain breeding strategies and genomic selection change this herd. So hyper-parameterization, even more herd-specific data. That's one thing. The other thing is the large language models. I think my mission in the last 15 years was to educate users using SimHerd. We spend a lot of time teaching, doing workshops on farm schools and veterinary schools. It's amazing to teach, but it also illustrates that it's difficult to use these models. You have to parameterize them and understand input and output. If there would be a reliable language model in between that can translate the question, the what if question, very practical. The farmer simply wants to know what if this and that happens. He's maybe not the most eloquent one to formulate this question, or doesn't have the same nomenclature as us. But if you would just have a language model that translate what he says in normal language into parameters and coefficients and odds ratios, then you can control SimHerd without, tweaking and calibrating and working all these parameters.
Yeah, because right now somebody on your staff is doing all of that at this point, right? It's not the farm going on a dashboard and typing in a natural language question like you'd see on it.
Not yet. No, we just got started on that, and it's happening around us. Maybe we can learn of how not to do it. We don't want to go too fast and do a proper evaluation of our users and the end user. But yeah, we're started that journey, you can say.
So with what you guys are doing with the concept of digital twins, some people I've read on different articles are saying, oh, we're going to replace advisors, we're going to replace the specialists, we're going to replace all these people with these simulated models of the farm. But what you are really trying to do is not necessarily replace those people, but really give them more power, I guess, to come at these problems that farmers are dealing with every day. Is that right?
When we started, we made these reports, PDF reports, and it said SimHerd on the top, and it said, economic impact of this and that. It's 50 euros. And we'd hand it over to the farmer and say, SimHerd says this and that. That was good. But I think if you would be able to gather farmers or employees as well, maybe the banker or nutritionist, around the model and spitball basically, what if we do this, what if we do that? And the model basically gives you answers. That's a much more like a platform it facilitates a discussion, I think. I don't think a model gives you one answer that's like relevant. Okay, we go with this answer. I think the whole process of discussing this is our target, this is where we want to go, we're considering this investment. I think it facilitates a discussion rather than giving you one answer. And that's what modern technology and some of the more flexible tools we've developed allows, that you can gather around a model basically and also have employees join in on these questions.
Right. Yeah, all the stakeholders.
Because a model can say like a certain investment is fantastic, a certain investment in technology is good on paper, but if that disrupts the work life of employees, maybe they also have a voice in that, and so models could also factor that in, or at least the discussion can be joined by others than just the direct decision maker.
Nope. What other things do you think a simulated model like this won't ever be able to truly replace on the decision-making process on a farm?
I think there's a fantastic ability to detect diseases, whether it's sensors or bolus technology or cameras, the eventual treatment of an animal and confirming that it's especially if antibiotics is involved. I think that's very important. There's still a human there assessing that and making that decision. I don't think a consumer would necessarily accept that models determine what animals to treat and not to treat. So I think around the whole animal health area, we need some humans still using old school intelligence, but still embrace the fantastic AI opportunities and sensor technology there is, absolutely.
Right.
If modern sensor technology can detect the disease, a farmer would say, the technology was correct. It confirms what I also saw. That's great, I think. That it's one step ahead of the farmer. Maybe 24 hours earlier, it can detect this milk fever, and the farmer sees, good job the sensor did. That's like a great human on the sideline. But if you would educate a next generation of farmers or the generation after that doesn't have, the feelings of, cold ears of a cow and recognizing the biology, that would be a loss, I think, if there's not a farmer to confirm or at least work with this technology hand in hand. Yeah,
I think that that's really how I learned was not only through technology, but having somebody knowledgeable alongside of me that had that, but I could also see the parameters that were happening in real time to the cow. So that really helped me learn much quicker, I think, than if I would have just learned from that person, because they were identifying the issue and what was going on, and then now how to progress from there. And the data that I was seeing matched that, so I could put those two things together in my head. So that's how I really got trained on animal health on my farm, and that went a lot further, I think, to make me a much better cow manager than I would have been otherwise. And those are great, like old school skills. Be shame if we'd lost those skills. On the other hand, I think you would need new skills as well, and not. Farmers don't have to be AI specialists or learn how to code, but I think they have to manage all that information that comes, on there's some recordings are done on every minute or every day or every week. I think interpreting that flow or pushing some of the information aside or I have some simulation models run through them and see this is relevant, this is irrelevant. I think managing all that information. Maybe I heard it on your podcast. I think Jeff Bewley, he talked about a CIO, like a Chief Information Officer. I'm not sure if it was Jeff that said that. It was a really nice podcast. But we need to manage that information, or else, as a farmer, we're gonna drown, and we're not gonna
see the forest through the trees, I think.
Yeah, and I've already seen that happening in certain places around the world at some, very large farms that have C-suite executive type roles with them. They're multiple farms, tens of thousands of cows. They already are employing, and that's a new additional role that they're adding because they see the huge value that can create.
Yeah, exactly.
So one other thing you're around a lot of data and see a lot of sensors in the industry. Do you see any sensors that you believe should be developed more, or that we might have holes in that would be good to have filled on the sensor hardware side of things?
I think the cameras are very promising. There's a lot of exciting things happening there. Just lameness recognition is a great one. It's been around for a couple of years. But even more, knowing how the cow behaves and feeding patterns and laying patterns, I think cameras are really going to add a lot of interesting knowledge to how a farm is managed. So maybe more like a herd supervision rather than supervising the rumination of an individual, which is excellent. I think there's some exciting developments looking over the whole herd, like how is the herd functioning, how is infrastructure, pathways, feeding, frequency, and all that. How can that be optimized?
No, that's definitely makes a lot of sense. Before we wrap up here, what is the biggest thing that excites you about the future of agriculture?
The large language models make a lot of these simulation models even more accessible. And also what other people work with. I think that there's an agent that helps you understand, make sense out of things. I think that's a very promising thing for the future. But I also hear what excites me is just how, in general, AI and machine learning just get so much more out of data. I mean, there's so much data gathered. Good job. A lot of people, organizations are doing. I think we can get even more out of that data by doing machine learning, reinforcement learning. That sounds really promising because the data is already there. We put a lot of money or time into collecting that, and it's really hopeful to hear that we can get a lot more out of that.
Yeah, and as you said, we've got all that historical data, and I don't think people realize the power of all of those many years of collecting data that they might have think was for nothing, how powerful that's going to be in the future.
But what I do think is that we have to have, I don't know if it's a guardrail, but there's a lot of fantastic solutions popping up everywhere. And typically the best salesperson wins, like sells his solution. And I hope that we and other people with a simulation approach do have this demand of return on investment. That they present the decision maker for, as fun as this is, as interesting as this sounds, it tackles a problem that only one out of 100 cows has. And now you're strapping a sensor on all of the 100 cows just to find that one cow, just to have a fictitious example. So I think we have to make sure that we make the right decisions and prevent that there's not a diminishing return. We can buy all the decisions or solutions in the world, but solution number 6 is not going to add anything if you've already invested in 5 of them. But the costs are definitely additive of all these solutions. So that's, I think, I hope, we can keep something like SimHerd justifiable in the future.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And that story you were just telling reminds me of many salesmen that have come on my farm. If I had the 3 pounds that every one of them promised for using their product, I think I'd be milking probably at least 100 liters a day per cow.
Exactly. I think if I can add one more promising development, is I think how well the industry is putting an effort on making data more uniform, comparable between herds. There's a lot of companies that work between countries. If they can get a standardized piece of set of KPIs from every farm, I think that helps. It improves decisions and improves the input of simulation models. I think that's very exciting keeps getting better. I also like how some management software, or at least some companies, branch out and not only have software that monitors the herd, but also the field, what happens in the field, feed coming in and off of the farm, scales, and also personnel. I think we can also use a lot of exciting tools to train farm personnel even better, and I don't know, reward them or keep them motivated. If we can do that better, even taking care of humans, I think they will do an even better job of taking care of cows.
Yeah, it all works in conjunction with each other, right? It's one big system.
Yeah, and they seem to branch out. There's some interesting players in the market that really embrace the whole ecosystem. That's exciting, I think. That is not a narrow vision, but a whole system approach. I like that a lot.
Yeah. We've got a bright future for the industry, I believe.
I believe so, absolutely.
Well, Jehan, thank you so much for being here today. How can people find out more about what you're working on with SimHerd?
Well, you can follow what we're doing on LinkedIn. We have a website as well, of course, SimHerd.com. And I think we're always looking for, like you started the conversation, if we want to go to a new country, we have to find collaborators. We're not going to pretend we know it all from Europe and take over advisory or whatever in the country. We need local advisors, specialists, vets, universities, extension services to make something like SimHerd more tailor-made to their circumstances, and have students work with it. And that's a good way to start, always with universities, and let them get some awareness of the necessity of return on investment and simulating decisions before you set sail to them.
Well, good. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Jehan.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it very much. I could be here.
Well, thanks once again for listening to another episode of the AgCulture Podcast with Jehan Ettema. Now, there's just a couple of things that I wanted to mention here at the end of the episode. Number one, as always, if you got value out of this episode, if you would share it with somebody that you know, we definitely appreciate that. That's how we grow our audience at the AgCulture Podcast. Don't do any advertising or anything like that. And speaking of advertising, you'll notice that for 2 years, I haven't had really any ads on the podcast, and I want to keep it that way. And I'm going to be launching a new program that's going to help with that, that's helping to sustain this podcast long term. And it's called Friends of the Show. So this is a concept where current and former guests of the show that have found value in it, that have got really great engagement from you guys, the audience, are giving back and are supporting this podcast. So I just wanted to mention that because you'll be seeing a little bit more about some of those friends of the show on our social media feed, as well as seeing some of those guests returning to add more value to what we're doing and provide more content and more ideas to share with you guys, the audience of the AgCulture Podcast. So if you have any interactions with these friends of the show, I would really appreciate it if you let them know that you heard about what they're doing because of our podcasts. That is something that goes a long ways with them and lends credibility to what we're doing here and the network that we're building with AgCulture Podcast. So with that, I want to thank you again, and we will see you next week for another exciting episode of the AgCulture Podcast. Thanks for listening.